Hey, what's going on, family? Welcome to another episode of The Finance Bro, where we have real conversations with real people about money. Today, I have Yinka on the show, who's the president of the Financial Literacy Institute and also a co-host of the On the Fly podcast. Now, the podcast I was on actually a couple weeks ago. Very good episode, very good conversation. So if you haven't had an opportunity to check it out, I'm going to link the show in the description below. So please be sure to check it out and leave some comments. Let us know what you think. But before we jump too far into the conversation, Yinka, can you please introduce yourself and then we'll go from there, my brother?
Yeah, of course, and I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to today's conversation, and again, it's an honor to be on your podcast. So, yeah, nonetheless, again, my name is Yinka. My full name is Olayinka Famodu. It's really awesome, and I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast a couple weeks back, but my first name, be it Olayinka, it actually means wealth surrounds me. And again, we can get into that where the wealth, right? Exactly, right? Where the wealth doesn't necessarily just mean financial, right? Because as you and I both know, wealth is a very open-ended term. And my dad named me because he's Nigerian. One of my parents, he named me Olayinka because my wealth was my six older siblings. But now I'm making that a double, triple, quadruple entendre, right? Because a bunch of
Mm.
things are wealth. But nonetheless, that's my name. I am a fifth-year biomedical engineer at the University of Akron, who also is, trying to scale his financial literacy business himself, right? So I also have my two business partners. They were on the podcast a couple weeks back. We got Zachary Owen and Sean Lacey. Shout out to you guys. I know you guys are going to watch this. And yeah,
Yeah.
this is something that I'm excited to kind of expound on today because I know you and I are both in this niche. But nonetheless, again, that's a little bit of who I am, and you're gonna learn more about me as we go throughout this call. So I'm excited.
All right. So for the listeners, Yinka is a financial coach like myself. So to kind of jump into the conversation, I guess the first question that I really want to ask is what drove you to become passionate about personal finance? Because it's typically
Yeah.
something that people kind of shy away from. So typically when you find somebody that is really passionate enough, especially enough to teach it to people and help
Yep.
people with it, typically
Mm-hmm.
there's something that they experienced that drove them towards that. So what happened
Yeah.
for you?
Absolutely. See, it's interesting because, like you mentioned, like there's that catalyst in our lives, right? For me, probably that biggest catalyst was finding that silver lining that was in COVID time. So, like I
Mm.
mentioned, I'm a student, and about 2.5 years ago, like peak COVID, right? It was at that time when in school, classes were online or classes were canceled, events were online, events were canceled, right? And I took a lot of the time that COVID gave me and I took advantage of it, right? So I
Mm.
was the kind of guy who, whether maybe classes were online and got Microsoft Teams, turned my camera off, but on my other side of my phone or my computer or something else, I have YouTube on. I'm listening to Anthony O'Neill doing all these things, right?
Mm.
So for me, I always was like, I wanted to learn things that school didn't teach me during school hours, where now I kind of have a little bit of the time, right? Because I'm not in class. So I was kind of playing a little bit of risky there, but again, no risk, no reward. Um, but let's go a level deeper right now. Why did I do that? I could have did anything with that time. Now, why did I do that? For me, I grew up in a household, which again, I would never change. I would never change the way I was raised. But I grew up in a household where my parents, I love them so much, I have so much respect for them. They did not have the best relationship with money, right? So they were always saying things like we would drive in a neighborhood in Minnesota where I'm from, and nice neighborhood, nice lavish neighborhood, and they'd be like, we see a nice house, we'd be driving by, oh, why do people need that much space in that house? Or see a nice car, they don't need that kind of car, it's a waste of money. And I would repetitively hear these conversations. But then I'd also be tapping into, think at the time back in the day, whether it's Dave Ramsey or Anthony O'Neill or Robert Kiyosaki, the list goes on, and they'd be saying something else and they've made it, right? So I'm listening to people who've made it who I've never met, and then I'm listening to people who I love and respect, which my parents didn't necessarily make it financially. Now they made it, obviously my parents probably have different goals, but they just had a negative connotation with money. So I understood and I kind of asked myself, I'm like, okay, so if I become wealthy one day, will my parents resent me? Because it seemed
Mm.
like they didn't really like, or they kind of resented like people who were wealthy, right? So I would have this conversation with myself, and I started to understand that money really amplifies the person you already are. Whether you're a bad person, amplifies that. Whether you're a good person, amplifies that, right? And me understanding myself, my core
Mm.
values is going to amplify my core values. So I wanted to change that paradigm because for me, I wanted to make sure that the family that I raise in my future has a positive relationship with money,
Mm.
right? So again, kind of growing up with a negative connotation and wanting to change it to a positive one, now having the time that was 2.5 years ago, I definitely took advantage of that time. And again, I love to tell people, I listened to the podcast, I watched the YouTube videos, I read the books, I talked to the mentors. Like I did deep learning on understanding these kinds of things that COVID gave me the time to do, which I'm very grateful for. But then even on top of that, right, during COVID as a student, whether it was from my university, because my university did this, or it was the government. They did like COVID checks, right? If you're familiar, like with the COVID checks that happened a couple years
Mhm.
back, right? Whether it was like the $1,200 or X amount of dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
So me being a FAFSA student, right? My school gave me a $1,200 check, and it was actually game to keep it 100. There's three times. There's like 3 different years, which is two and
Yeah.
a half, something like that. 3 different semesters, something like that. But then also as well, it was the government that did the same thing, right? It was $1,200, whatever.
Mhm.
So at the same time, I'm learning while also getting this money. I'm like, hold on, I now can understand what to do with this, whether it's paying off debt, like I was paying off my car at the time,
Mhm.
and I ended up paying it off like way faster than I planned to, which is amazing because I had this information. And or it was, understanding now how credit cards work, and I can apply to a credit card. Now again, I got my car paid off. My parents put my name on their Comcast bill, so I'm building some credit there, right? Or even just opening up my Roth IRA, doing things like that. I'm like, wow, this is such a unique time for me, not only to learn, but I also have assets that I can now do stuff with, pay off debt, invest, X, Y, Z. So all these kinds of things, from growing up with a negative connotation of money and wanting to change that paradigm, to taking advantage of the time that COVID gave me, but also even taking advantage of the money that I was kind of given, which I'm very grateful for. I put all these things together, and that's now where I'm at today with my personal endeavors, whether it's FLI or my things I'm also working on in the background. It's just so many things that had to line up for me to, really take financial literacy to that next level.
So you hit on something, being time, and I like talking about time a lot because I'm sure you see it with clients as well, but and not even just with clients, but whatever it is, be it, getting your money together, fitness, building relationships, whatever it is. But it's easy. Like now, you say, you had time because COVID slowed things down, and you were filling that time with positive things, which is
Right.
which is awesome because you see a lot of people fill that time with things that don't necessarily pay it forward for them. However, how would you how would you address a person that felt like they didn't have time and still needed
Mm,
to do those things?
yeah. And that's the thing, right? I think you and I come across these people all the time. And maybe those are the people we're trying to convert as clients. Right.
Mhm.
So it's very interesting because when people come up to me, now they know me as a money guy. Hey, Yinka, how can I start investing? How can I get my budget right? Da, 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 da. It's very interesting you're bringing up time, because one of the first questions I usually ask them is, show me your calendar. And they're like, hold on, Yinka, I asked you for a budget. I'm like, correct, you did. Show me your time budget. And they're like, that's not what I meant. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back for a second.
Mhm.
Why do you want to understand how to manage your money if you don't have your time on lock? Why? Well, think about it. If you want to get financially free, why is that? Is to do whatever you want, wherever you want, with whoever you want, wherever you want to do it, whenever you want to.
Mhm.
That key last part is whenever you want to, right? So it's like we want to become financially free so we can do whatever we want, whenever we want to do
The
it.
power of choice.
The power of choice, absolutely, right? And obviously, as you and I know, time is the most valuable asset, not money. And people get that confused all the time, right? At a young age, sure, you have all the time in the world, no money. Okay, I understand that. But then once you start to understand the value of your time, then at the end of the day, we're probably going to be paying money for our time back. It's going to be the inverse. So to directly answer your question, I like to tell people, if you kind of think about money as a value of your time, which it really, really is. And if you're familiar with Alex Mosey, which I'm pretty sure, he talks about this all the time, where he thinks of, let's say, if you were to buy, and again, it takes a different kind of mindset to think about this, but if you're trying to buy something, it's $100, $1,000, doesn't matter. Instead of looking at the price, think about how much time would it take to attain that money, obtain that kind of money to purchase that item, because then that makes you think about it differently. Ooh, am I going to spend 67 hours on these new Jordans? I don't know. See, now that 67 hours,
Mhm.
think about that for a second. Okay. That changes your whole thinking about it, right? So for me, when people say, I don't have the time, I don't want to learn this, it's very interesting because this is one of those topics that you're going to have to learn in life, whether it's sooner or later. I don't know. I mean, I do know about you, but if I wasn't talking about you, like, I don't know about you, my guy, but I'd rather get myself set now, because choose your heart. Are you going to choose it now? Or are you going to choose it later? The heart's going to come. It's inevitable. I want to choose it now when I might have the time to choose it. That's a whole other
Mhm.
thing. Have the time to choose it. I'm young. I can make mistakes. It is what it is, and I have time to rebound. But for me, it's something where I want my success to come sooner in life, right? And again, I'm not trying to chase a dream that's too far away, or trying to be too expedient where I'm not trusting the process. No, but for me, I'm the kind of guy where time is of the essence, and I want to make sure I maximize on that time. But again, it goes back to being able to budget that time. So when people tell me, I don't have the time, yeah, you do. Do you budget it? Do you manage it correctly? Okay, let's work on that first before I show you how to budget. That's how I address that. Good
And
question.
that's a great answer, because and I like the time budget piece, because I also do the same thing. And so I like to hit on that with people, because it's important for them to understand that the time is there. It's just how you use it. And
Yeah.
there's when you start seeing the wasted time like that. And so one of the things I like to have people do is, hey, when like you talk about the time budget, hey, for a week, I want you to just track everything you're doing. And the amount of hours spent on Instagram, on the phone, watching, TV, doing all of these things. Like, yo, you have the time, it's just not being used properly. So I
Absolutely.
tell people, yo, don't say you don't have time. You need to figure out what needs to be removed so that you can use the time efficiently.
Priorities. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
priorities, right? So prioritize, being able to prioritize is huge.
Yeah.
So speaking of prioritization, how do you how would you recommend someone getting started with, getting their money together, learn how to prioritize?
Yeah. No, so great question, right? And for me, it goes beyond the numbers. I like to tell people, I mean, money is just a number. If you're able to extract the emotion, that's great, but that takes you have to get a little bit into it to understand that if you are able to extract your emotion, right? Again, that takes a while. But with the emotion still there and tap into it, you have to understand and define your why. Like,
Mm.
why do you even want to do this? Because if you just try to tell somebody randomly, bro, you should budget. My guy, open up a Roth IRA. They're not going to really do it if they don't see the reason why they're doing it. Sure, they
Mm.
might see the numbers, but they might not want to do it because they might have more emotion tied to their money, so they want to let it go, right? Or they have different intentions with their money, whether it's buying liabilities or this, that, and the third. So if someone really wants to get their finances right, or you try to explain why they should, tap into the emotion, not in a negative, slimy way, no, but what do you want your future family to look like? Legacy, right? How do you want to be able to have a maybe a beautiful marriage or something like that? How does retiring your parents, how does that make you, what does that make you look, what does that make you think about, or look, what does that look like to you, right? So these are all kinds of questions that I would ask, and also ask myself, back when I really got into this, is for me to be financially free and taking the necessary steps, whether it's budgeting, investing, paying off debt, building businesses, whatever. It's understanding that for me, and I'll talk about myself specifically, I would love, and this is still the goal, a couple things. I would love to not only retire my parents. Now, again, you hear a lot of people say that,
Yeah.
but for me, I've graciously had the opportunity to have both my parents in my life, and for me to pay it back to them tenfold, not only just financially, right? Primarily financially, because I mentioned they didn't have the best connotation of money. So it'd be great to bless them monetarily. And then it's like, hold on, my son is wealthy. Maybe not all wealthy people are bad. Paradigm shift for
Mhm.
them, right? So for me, that's one of my deeper whys. My dad's getting up there in age, so I really would like to do that. My mom, she's killing it at her job, all these kinds of things. But again, I would love to see her relax. So I'm tapping into my emotion, right? That's a why of why the things I do that I do. Another reason is for me wanting to even build my family and cultivate my family. For me, being completely honest, like I mentioned, study engineering. Right now, mind you, going into college my freshman year, I mean, my dad is an industrial engineer, right? So STEM was probably already in the cards for me. But if I really had this kind of passion, or I knew of things like this at my freshman year, I probably would have chosen a different major. Now that's not to knock on engineering, but that's a whole different conversation, right? But for me, I would love to be able to give my kids the opportunity to really tap into fundamentally, and even maybe potentially be entrepreneurs. I think that'd be awesome. Build a business out of whatever their passion is, but to go absolutely 100% in whatever they want to do and have it be 1000% independent of money, right?
Mm.
So keeping it a buck, for me, going into engineering my freshman year, it was the primary force was monetary,
I
right?
think I
That's
think everyone is.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, right. And that's something I don't want for my kids, right? So I'm basically saying all these things because to get someone started, you have to understand why they're doing it, right? So, and you must be familiar with this, but like the SMART goal method, right? That's a whole other thing I love working with my clients on. Day
Mhm.
one, our first session, we set financial SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. And the
Mhm.
most key letter in that acronym is the relevant, right?
Mhm.
Why are you doing this? What does this pertain to? Right? Cool. Specific, measurable. Yeah, how can you measure attainable? What does that look like? Or what do you have to do to attain it, right? Timely, when you can execute. But the R, why are you doing this in the first place? Why is this even a goal? Like, what are you trying to achieve here? That's something that before I even get someone acquainted with, after they get past the why, okay, now we get into the zero-based budget, right? That's step one. But prior to the zero-based budget, we sit down, we understand, what does financial freedom look like to you? What does it feel like to you? Right? Maybe what does it taste like to you? Right? The kinds of foods, like we really start to tap into that, right? And it's something that, if I'm not mistaken, if you're familiar with the book "I Will Teach You to Be Rich" by Ramit Sethi, he talks about the philosophy of a rich life, right? He talks about, again, what does it look like, smell like, taste like, sound like, feel like, right?
Mm.
It just is getting you in that emotional state to really drive the fire that's inside you to start to get to do the things that maybe aren't as favorable, like sacrificing things monetarily, or getting your butt up early in the morning to go to an extra job or whatever thing. Like, these are things people don't want to do, but if you have a driving force inside you, oh, then you're really going to do it no matter what it is.
Mm. So
Yeah.
in that R that you hit in relevancy, another piece, because I do the smart goal planning too, and I like that you brought up the relevancy, because another issue that I've seen is many people aren't able to dig deep to keep working towards their goals because the goals they're chasing aren't theirs.
Yeah. No, see, and I like that a lot, and I can even speak, to that of myself, where, like I mentioned, studying engineering. Again, I love and respect my dad. He's absolutely my hero in my life. But the only influence I had going into college was, the influence of STEM, right? And out of all my siblings, I'm the only engineer. And so my dad probably really wanted to make his last one just like him, which, again, I'm not mad at, and I probably 100% change, because I love the place I'm at right now, right? But kind of vicariously, him living through me, that's something that was probably a little bit of his dream, right? And again, going back to that R, for me, that's something that, number one, I would respectfully love for my children to not have to go through, right?
Mhm.
So whatever they're already tapping into at a young age, oh, you're already interested in this? Okay, now I kind of, instill some of those entrepreneurial skills into them, so maybe they can expound on that themselves. But really, another roadblock in this kind of thing, right, is people don't want to get deep. Now, this is very interesting, because this is
Mm.
another thing I talk about in our sessions, where it's like, okay, as your coach, tell me as much as you want to tell me, and obviously, feel comfortable. You don't have to tell me everything, right? But the more you tell me, the more I know how to help you,
Mhm.
right? And I understand, for a lot of people, finances can be a very touchy subject.
Yeah.
But without that vulnerability, then there really is no growth, right? And that's why we call it FAC, financial accountability coaching, right? Because we want to make sure we're there by you every step of the way, and we're actually holding you to what you're going to say you do, right?
Mm.
And we
Mhm.
want to make sure, even in our community, where you have guys around you, guys and gals around you, that are doing it with you, they're also equally as vulnerable, right? Because I think I'm a sucker for vulnerable, honest, and candid conversations. Because for me, like, facades or things that are put up, or a wall, it's just inauthentic. And again, this is all kind of
Mhm.
all feelings, no facts. Inauthenticity to me is just, it's not something that's conducive for actual growth, right? Because it might be hard. And again, we're talking about finances, because there's all other realms of life. But when you can really get real about what your issues are, then, again, for people who are knowledgeable in that area that can help you, they know exactly how they can help you, right? They know
Yeah.
exactly where you are, right? And that's what I love. Shout out to a lot of the guys in the FAC program, guys and gals in the FAC program. We're letting them know, hey, we are literally here to help. We've been in your
Mhm.
space. We know
Mhm.
what it's like. I'm very transparent. Like I mentioned a little bit before, how I extract my emotion from money, right? If you're able to get to a place where money is literally just a number, no matter if you have 100,000, greater than $100,000 negative net worth, it is what it is. But if you know you're X, you're at X, and you really want to get to Y, right? Okay, we really understand. We really need to understand what got you here and how we need to get to there. But if you're not telling me, I can only help you as far as let me in. Right? I can't really help you if I'm just standing outside the house. You gotta let me inside the house, right? To let me help. So, just kind of creating a nice, comfortable space, making sure that they're feeling comfortable, they're feeling that they're at ease, and obviously, again, as being able to, like, show testimonials that, yeah, you can hear it from me as the business owner, but hear from the other people in the community, right? We're here, we
Mhm.
want to help, but we understand that's a roadblock, and that's something that, again, we want to make sure we cultivate that transparent environment. So that also comes from us as the coaches as well, showing our transparent stuff.
Mm. I think you're spot on with that, because that's the whole reason my first book was called The End of Smoker Mindset. It's
Yeah.
because the first thing that I like to address with anyone I sit down with is their mindset. Because
Yeah.
if they're not mentally in a place to make the numbers on these spreadsheets and stuff that we're creating working,
Yeah.
it's never going to work. If they can't be disciplined enough to not go spend money on Amazon every day, or to not go to brunch and not be able to tell someone no when they get asked to go to brunch 3 times a week and things like that. If you can't get over that, it doesn't matter what we put on the list, because you're never going to see it through. You're always going to
Yeah.
fall back to your original habits and your original mindset.
Right.
If there's something that, I recommend, like for instance, one of the things in the book I talk about, one of my friends was like, their rent in the area that they lived in was extremely expensive. And I was like,
Okay.
yo, you should just move here with these two friends, these two people.
Yeah.
Y'all can live together. And then that'll cut down on your living expenses, which would free up X amount of dollars for you. And then you'll be able to, pay off debt, save money, blah, blah, blah. And, you do this for a year, this is where you could be.
Right.
And that process of getting them from that initial conversation to actually doing it was like probably about a year and a half, 2 years. But because they had to fight through so many other things, the family didn't agree with it, right? Why would you do that? You got your own place. Well, and it's just so many different factors that they have to work through, which makes it difficult, because as a person that's dealing with financial issues, you already feel vulnerable. You feel like, you don't own yourself, you don't own your time, you don't know, you don't feel confident in the decisions that you're making. So when you doing something and someone is coming with a very different perspective on how to get out of this situation, but the people that you grew up with, you love and you trust, are like making it seem like that actually isn't a good idea, it puts you in a dilemma. It's like, wow, do I trust this person who I know, like, everything in my mind is telling me that they know what they're talking about and this could go correctly for me, but my family's saying that I shouldn't do it. And like, I know my family, I trust my family, I love my family, but something that we all have to understand is that we can love our family, but we also have to know what's best for us. And we
That's
shouldn't let our trust and love and loyalty for anybody, misdirect our actions and our decisions from moving us where we need to be. And sometimes we have to step out on a limb. And I like to tell people too, is okay, if you sit down and you look at those people telling you that that's not the right answer, look at them and tell me where you see the right answer at. And they like, well, none of them are good with money, none of them. So then why would you take their guidance on the way to get out of this, as opposed to someone that has done it, they do it, and will make sure that you're getting the right information and will encourage you and hold you accountable along the way.
Absolutely.
And they're like, and it flips that, that whole perspective for them.
Yeah. No, and while you were saying that, I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, why? Obviously you love and respect your family, as you should. That makes total sense. But if you're seeing that they're not in a place that you want to be financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, socially, whatever the aspect is, obviously we're talking about financially, like, you can still love them, respect them, but why are you taking advice from someone who's not in a position that you want to be in? Right? It's like, if you want to become fit, why are you taking fitness advice from someone who's obese? I'm just keeping it real right now. Obviously,
Absolutely.
you can translate that to whatever you want to, but it's like, you have to really think about that as, okay, they have their best intentions for me and they love me and they respect the things that I ultimately will do, but they also aren't in the position that I want to be in, so why would I listen to that, right? But again, it's all dependent on the person, but that's a great point, right? And something I even wanted to talk about, and I know you're big into this, right, is habits, right? And what's very interesting about this is, I'm going to make a small parallel between like finances and the gym, right? Because I know, again, you're big into finances and you're big in the gym, right? You're big into everything, you're killing it, right? I think what's very interesting is that I love talking about the gym so much because the gym can teach you so many things that are transferable across like so many different aspects of life, especially finances, right? Because you think about like discipline, tenacity, grit, being responsible, being, doing the stuff that you don't really even want to do, but knowing that has a great outcome for you, right? It's very interesting because what I like telling people, you may or may not have read the book, but Atomic Habits, it's a great book where, right, great book, talks about the philosophy of habit stacking, right? So it's like, to kind of change your whole, because we were talking about mindset, and I think that's so beautiful. Before you can start really with anything financial, it really just starts in here. It absolutely starts in here. Like, before you become wealthy in your bank account, you have to first become wealthy in here. This is absolutely reflective of what's going on in here, right? So if you're broke, well, it's here. If you're rich, definitely it's in here, right? So for me, and hopefully for the listeners who are listening to this, you need to understand the fundamentals of having really solid habits. And again, for a lot of people, even in the FLI community, like we have a nice little tab in the Discord talks about fitness, right? Now, mind you, we're a financial services company, but we also talk about fitness. Why? Because again, if you are going to be able to stick to, even though we're not, telling people, hey, do this fitness because we're not a fitness, company. But if we have a little fitness tab where people are able to like post their daily photos of them at the gym, right? It's that consistency, it's that accountability. It's that, if I don't go to the gym and post the photos today, they're gonna know I didn't go to the gym. Now, what's that translatable to do? Oh man, if I don't, get my budget on point, and then in our next FAC meeting, right? And, if I don't, it's like if you really think about all the things it takes to go to the gym, to stay consistent in the gym, to track your progress in the gym, like all these things you're learning here. That's something
Mhm.
that's relatively simple. You just have to start picking up some weights and writing the weights you pick up down. It's really
Yeah.
not that hard. Maybe start taking some photos. I mean, that's next level, but it's not too far off, right?
Yeah.
All these skills are going to now start to transfer into your diet, into your education, into your finances, into your social skills, into your spirituality, right? But again, it starts with the habits that are able to change your mindset. So I think it's a beautiful point talking about the mindset because it definitely starts there.
Yeah, so I'm definitely big into fitness too, and I like that parallel that you use because then I like to build on it as well because people like people ask sometimes like, yo, why do you talk about fitness so much with finance? And I agree with you. I think they are intertwined, and the reason I believe
Absolutely.
that is if you think about it, let's just say you decide that you want to get fit and get healthy, right? Well, if you're getting fit, you're getting healthy, which means you're probably going to eat cleaner. If you're eating cleaner,
Right.
that means your grocery bill is going to go down because you're not spending all this money on junk food. It affects your budget, right? In a positive
Facts.
way, right?
Facts.
And then also, now if you've dedicated your life to going to the gym, you're getting healthy, you're staying in shape, your heart's strong. You've also limited your amount of medical bills that you're going to have over time, which means
Yep.
you're not going to come out of pocket for those things.
Life
For the
insurance as well. All these things. Yeah.
like so all of it has so many more effects, like positive outcomes for you from getting into the gym.
Yeah.
But also those other pair, like you said, the discipline, like the waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym when you don't want to, when you're tired, when you were working till 1 o'clock in the morning the day before.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, oh well, I stayed up late, so I'm gonna miss it. But the person that really wants to get out here and get it, there's no excuses. I'm going to get up and like, if I want to make sure I get sleep, then I'm going to figure out how to get my work faster done faster during the day. And but I'm not going to miss it because I told myself I'm going to do it. When you can
Absolutely.
be, when you can hold your word to yourself, that's when because that's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's easy to keep your word to someone else. It's hard to keep a word to yourself because that means you have to hold yourself accountable to it.
Yeah.
But when you're the person holding yourself accountable, it's easy to ignore it. Who's gonna address you if you don't do it?
Sure.
So it's a lot more difficult to hold yourself accountable. But like I tell people all the time, when you have people talk about accountability partners and things all the time, I don't think a person should even approach an accountability partner until they've proven to themselves that they can hold themselves accountable. Because at the end of the day, an accountability partner, what are they going to do? They still can't do it for you,
It's
right?
true.
So if you can't be honest with yourself and hold yourself accountable, then you're wasting their time and your time because now what are you going to
Yeah.
lie to them and tell like, oh, this and that, and now they can go work with somebody who actually wants to get it done.
Yeah. It's more kind of like a motivational partner, right? Because if you're
Yeah.
already on that track of being accountable to yourself, well, and maybe you and that person are doing it together. That's a whole nother right level. I think that's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing level, whether it's financially, fitness, it doesn't matter. You guys are able to, keep each other motivated on the journey. But you made a great point, right? Well, if I'm someone's financial fitness, doesn't matter, anything kind of accountability partner, but they just don't want to do it. Well, I can't, if I'm going to be your accountability partner and I'm letting you know every day, hey, make sure you send a picture and make sure you do this or make sure you do it, and you're still not doing it. Well, it's not that I'm not doing my job, it's that you aren't opening up yourself to be able to want to be held accountable, right? Nonetheless, even be motivated because you're not being, accountable to
Mm-hmm.
yourself. So I think that's a great point. I love that a lot.
So something you said at the beginning of the show that I wanted to hit on too is you spoke about, I know you're with the Financial Literacy Institute. One of the things you want to tell you talk about what we're not taught in school. The finances were not
Right.
taught in school. So that's huge because we're not taught that in school. But I have a different thought on that a little bit. Not
Okay.
not against it, but
Right.
the point being that I hear a lot of people use that as an excuse when it comes to money and why they're not making the proper decisions. But the reality of the situation is we live in the information age. And if
It's
we
true.
really want the information, just like you did, COVID, you went and found the information.
That's a good
But
point.
the problem is people know they don't have it, but they're also not seeking it. And in a time where
Yeah.
information is at our fingertips, you can go and
Yeah.
ask somebody. I bet they can tell you what Cardi B did yesterday. They're telling you about what's going on with the Young Thug and stuff in Atlanta, right? But then if you ask them, hey, how much did inflation go up last year? They look at you like a deer in headlights. It's all it's but they we have the same 24 hours, but we're spending it differently. But then those are the same people that say that everything is against them. But it's like, yo, you got to start giving yourself a leg up before anybody else can pull you up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. So you mentioned, and this is so good, right? So our mission is to teach financial literacy skills that weren't taught in school. Now, if you like, it's so interesting because there's levels to that, right? Because there's a whole other theory on why it's not, right? That's a whole other conversation. And you and I both know, like, that's a whole other conversation. But if you really think about it, right? Even the education that I'm going to school for, perhaps even the education you went to school for, right? That also at the time we went to school was also online. So if you this is a good conversation, right? So like, why did we go to school? Right, that's a whole nother aspect. It's like biomedical engineering, I could probably learn the same skills on Coursera or on YouTube or Harvard or Google Online or whatever, and pay relatively nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting because there's this whole idea of paying to pay attention. And I love that so much. You pay to pay attention. I'm realizing that so much of so many aspects, like even tithing. Again, that's a whole other conversation, spirituality, you pay to pay attention, right? So it's like, okay, sure, financial literacy wasn't taught in school. Now, that does not mean that you should be, absolutely ignorant to the idea of financial literacy because it wasn't taught in school. No. But what are you going to have to do? Yeah, now you're going to have to go outside of school and learn it yourself, which the average person doesn't want to do. And that's why, obviously, the 99% are broke. Now it makes sense, right? Because and again, I'm going to tap very briefly into the theory, if financial literacy was taught in school, then a lot more people would be financially well off, which would mean a lot less workers, which would mean the economy, and you know where I'm going with this, right? So it's like, it makes sense why it's not taught in school. But then what's very interesting is, like you just mentioned, it's out there. It really is out there. Now, you have to think about this. If it's out there, and a lot of the information, as what I got, was free, right? So then, and it's very interesting too, because I keep it an absolute buck with the people in the FAC session, the FAC program that we have. It's like I tell some of the like strong people in there too who are doing really well. It's like a lot of the information that we're teaching to you is not new information, and by no means are we SIE, are we some financial advisor? No, no, right? But there's some degree of paying to pay attention. You have to pay attention. Same thing with school, right? You rack up student loan debt, and yet now obviously you get a degree and you get some sort of certification, and you get some backing for what you did, so a company can hire you. Yeah, sure, but you could have got that same certification, maybe not to the collegiate degree, but you can get that same kind of certification for SolidWorks, for MATLAB, for Minitab, for you name it, right? Online.
Yeah.
So why do we go to school? Why do we do this? Because we pay to pay attention. I think that's completely real, and I can see that with a lot of the guys in the FAC program, because a lot of them are hungry. There's a whole other thing. A lot of them are hungry to get that financial information, and it is out there for free. But then you have to think about, I want it now. I kind of want it. I want it, condense and reduce and cut out all the BS, right? Because for me, I learned a lot of this information I told you about 2.5 years ago, right? And I'm now at a point where I'm selling this information, basically information arbitrage, right? And people are paying us for it to get it in a short period of time. So if you really think about it, the people in the FAC are getting a huge discount time-wise, because they don't have to go through all the things I went through or the mistakes, and they're just paying it with money, and now they get the information like that within an hour. So paying to pay attention is it's a very interesting philosophy with it, and I believe that's why a lot of people either don't do it because they don't want to pay, right? Because they don't understand that value, or the reason why they do it is because again, maybe going back to the accountability piece, but also too, it gets that information to them like this without having to go read all those books, listen to all those podcasts, talk to all those mentors, watch all those YouTube videos, as probably you and I did, right? So I believe that's probably what it is.
No, that was well said. And to add on to this a little bit more, when as the information's out there, right, there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable with numbers, don't really understand all the jargon, right? And I'm not expecting someone to go out there and learn everything, because that's what we're here for. Like you said, you're paying me to put this, not only to simplify it and give it to you faster, but also you're paying me for my ability to be able to break it down into something that relates to your lifestyle, for one. But two, just like with anything, and you break it down, we'll start with the financial piece, right? If you go and say you reading something on credit, and you don't necessarily understand everything, but because you read it, Now say you come and sit down with, now you come and sit down with me, or they come and sit down with you. Well, because I at least went through it and got a basic understanding, the questions that I ask will be more effective to get me towards the answer I want. It's very different coming into the situation and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, as opposed to like, hey, I saw this, and this. What does that mean? And how does it apply to me? It's like, oh, I can help you with that. I can't really, it takes a lot longer to help with, I don't know what I'm doing, as opposed to like, hey, can you explain this to me and how I can break, it's like, okay, because now you've given yourself some direction by doing some research. You don't have to figure out the whole world. Hey, we do all the reading. That's what all those books and things are.
Exactly.
But what is expected is that you start the groundwork, because I can't learn for you. And no matter what, even at the end, the expectation is that after you're done being coached, you continue to learn and build the confidence over time to do it, because I'm not going to be here forever. So whether or not you work with a coach or an advisor or anything else, at some point the onus still goes on to you.
Yeah, no, that's real. And again, I keep it absolutely. I love what you just said, right? Because keeping it real with the guys in the FAC program, it's like, we explain to them, we understand, we don't expect that they stay in the program forever and continue to have to pay and do all these kinds of things. Now, if you do that, great. I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah.
But it's like the habits that you're learning with us, even for the people. Also, I love having this real conversation. Keeping it real with the guys, even for the people who, let's say, they got what they wanted out of the FAC program and they leave it, right, or they're done with it, which is fine. And obviously that's how it works. We reach out to them, we ask them, hey, did you get what you came into the program looking for? Did your mindset change financially, or did your mindset change financially, right? Because we understand, we hope that post AC, post program, that these skills and habits are ingrained in you. And then it even gets a little bit deeper than that. This is now where I selfishly think about it. It's like, wow, I and you are not only teaching these people, but we're teaching them, and they are going to teach their kids. They might even teach their spouse.
Yeah.
Their kids might even teach their kids. And that's where it starts to get really generationally deep. It's like, wow, I'm really put a lot of passion and purpose into my coaching, because I want to make sure this sticks, they change, and it continues, right? Because what we hope is that, or what we, I guess, hope that doesn't happen, is that you come to the program and everything, and then let's say you leave, right? And whether we hear back from you or not, we would hope that, what doesn't happen is that you just fall off and you go back to your old ways. No, clearly you didn't learn what you do, or I got to take accountability as a bad coach, right? But we understand that we want to give you that kind of service so you can continue these habits as you go out through your life, right? And as you just mentioned, right, as a coach, it's kind of, the expectation is a little more on us that we had all that knowledge, like we read the books, or we got licensure, or we did a lot of our research or whatever, so we can bring you, because there's a level of trust, right? Again, they're paying us, so they're expecting that the information we're telling them is valid information, which 100%, obviously, as it should be. Like that's part of the business and services aspect of it, right? So no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think when you kind of think about it like that, where it's like, I'm not only just teaching this person, I'm teaching them habits that they're also going to teach their spouse, their kids, their friends, their family, and hopefully they get excited about it, right? But that's a level of responsibility of us as a coach, kind of like teachers, because teachers are teaching us what we need to know as students. But if we're not learning, well, that's 100% on, well, not 100%, I can't say 100%, but it's a majority on the teacher based upon the way that they're teaching, right? So, and that's a whole nother level of being like kind of a good teacher and a good coach. But no, I couldn't agree more with what you just said there. I think that's really good.
Yeah. So when one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of clients, and I speak about this a lot on a lot of my content, and it's always interesting after working with a client about 2 months, especially the ones that come in and like, yo, I'm really serious about this, and whatever you tell me to do, like, I'm going to execute viciously.
Yeah.
One of the things that always ends up happening is they realize that the people that before we met they were spending time with, they start having to spend less time with. And it's because, they realize that their visions aren't aligned. Now that they're trying to level themselves up and get in a better position, they realize that the people that they were spending their time with and doing things with don't have the same drive. And the things that they focus on directly counteract their goal to become financially free, to get out of debt. Everything they want them to participate in will bring them more into debt. It's bringing them more stress. It's getting them, more offline. And once they start locking in and they have that accountability and somebody that, we've been working and they built trust with me, they realize that, wow, I need a group of people like you.
Facts.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh wow, like I need to get rid of these people. But
Yeah.
there is also a feeling of guilt that comes with it because they're like,
True.
hey, I feel bad because like, am I abandoning my friends? And I always ask this question. I say, okay, so you've identified that the things that they try to get you to do take you away from your goals and aren't necessarily really good for you, right? But what you're trying to do and get everyone to do can benefit and skyrocket all the rest of your lives. So wouldn't it make sense that it would adjust to where you're trying to go because you're the one that can lead people to a better life as opposed to being
Yeah.
there? And if they really cared about you as friends, they would recognize that and they would be on board. But
Yeah.
because they don't and they're not, there's probably any people for you and you shouldn't feel bad. They don't feel bad about trying to pull you away from your goals. So why do you feel bad about pulling away to seek your goals?
Yeah. No, and that's a really good component to a lot of this, right? And I think that when these conversations do come up, right, kind of a couple things are asked. Number one, I ask that same person, are you willing to take the responsibility to teach maybe what I'm teaching or maybe what you're learning on your own now that your whole paradigm is shifting? Because again, finances is just, it's so interrelated to so many different things, right? So if your finances are
Everything.
leveling up, your fitness is leveling up, your spirituality, your social skills, your fashion,
Relationships.
everything, relationships, everything, right? So are you going to take the responsibility to teach your friends? Are you going to be that leader? That's the first question, right? No, I'm not ready for that one yet. Okay, that's fair. Okay, second question, like you just asked, do you see these friends as assets or liabilities, right? And if that stumps them, they think about it for a second. Well, you already got your answer, right? And I understand this because it's a factor of loyalty. And I completely respect loyalty, 1000%. But maybe keep those friends at an arm's distance,
Loyalty
right?
goes both ways.
That's real. That couldn't be closer to the truth, right? And without absolutely cutting off the relationship, keep them at an arm's distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without just throwing them off in the distance, just ensure that they're not hindering your growth, because then that's something that, well, clearly we're not really making some gains here, whether it's financially or anything, because now you're sticking with the wrong people. Again, you're the average of the five most people you hang out the most with, right? So I think that's a beautiful piece to it, right? And that's something where I've even understood that at a personal level. I like to
Mm-hmm.
tell this all the time, right? I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Minnesota, right? And there's something that the Midwesterns we call the Midwest mindset. It's very complacent. It's very like, I'm not leveling up, right? It's not a Dallas. It's not an Atlanta. It's not a New Orleans. It's not a New York. It's not hustle bustle.
Yeah.
Like the Minnesota, the Ohio, the Michigan, like very like comfortable. Like still, like there's
Mm-hmm.
some well off people, but like
Mm-hmm.
we're not hustling, right? And I'm not over condoning like the hustle culture. No, what
Yeah.
I'm saying is like the leveling up culture. I think I like that a lot, right? So I've understood that at a personal level, where my prior to like FLI, the Standard, all these other groups, right? Prior to all of this, I was and you could probably relate to this as well. And I know a lot of people that I know now in my current groups relate to this, where I always felt like I was the big fish in my friend group, right? And that was never to knock on my friends at the time, but friends would always come to me for financial, tips and tricks, for fitness tips and tricks, for educational and career prep, all these kinds of, like, people still come to me to this day for resumes and LinkedIn reviews, right? I'm always that big fish, right? And I always felt like I was consistently pouring into people, pour, 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 pour. But
Mm-hmm.
then two things came out of that. Number one, it was exhausting trying to pour into people who probably more than 75% of them didn't want to be poured into in the first place. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you're probably not going to take the information. And then number two, well, those same people rarely would ever be poured back into me or ever pour back. So it's like, hold on. So what's going on here, right? So then I came to understand that I probably, like a lot of people, I tell this to all the time, right? It's going to get a little bit uncomfortable, but with that uncomfortability, that's where growth, stems. You're probably going to have to find a community outside of the people that you know, whether it's digital, whether it's a different state. Like myself, I went to school in Ohio. I grew up in Minnesota. People ask me that question all the time. Nico, why did I go to school in Ohio, right? And I give them the whole spiel, D1 soccer and biomedical engineering or whatever, right? But I'm so glad that I did, because if I would have stayed, and still in the Midwest, mind you, but if I would have stayed with the same people that I grew up with, not knocking them, but it's like I still know a lot of people. I see them on the Snapchat stories and Instagram. They're still in the same place that they were 5 years ago, my guy. And that's not good. Like, it's not
Mm-hmm.
good, right? You're staying with the same people who are probably keeping you down. So you need to kind of get uncomfortable. Maybe again, whether it's online with online groups, or you can find maybe if you're at school, study in a different place. You want to start to study with the smart people. Maybe you need to start going to the library, bro. Right? It's all about
Yeah.
environment and perspective, right? And it's like, that's why I like to tell a lot of the guys who or people who are leveling up in their lives. If you feel like now you're going this way and your friends are still staying here, well, without throwing away your friends. Again, put the arm's distance, and then now it'll be up to them if they, stop reaching out to you. Da, da, da. Okay, cool. Maybe some friendships aren't meant to be there. Maybe it's only there for a season. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Start to find like-minded people, and it's really, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not that hard. How? Maybe you're watching a certain YouTube video and you're looking at the comments. You can align with anybody there, or maybe you're tapping into there's Discord communities about basically everything now. And one of the reasons I brought up Discord is that, like, even FLI, and I know I talked to you about this earlier today, like it's so interesting to try to find communities that are out there so you can already be put with people in a fast manner with people who are already your mindset, right? And that's something we did with FLI's FAC program, that once you join the program, you get access to that kind of community where you're already around people who, again, were vulnerable enough with their finances to want to, get better, just like yourself. But then also two are similar minded where they're growing financially. So they're most likely growing spiritually, fitness wise. Again, I mentioned the fitness tab. So you're already around people who you're growing with, right? And then whether you want to take those conversations offline, well, when I say offline, like hopping on a Zoom, I guess it's still online, but having that face to face rather than that chat,
Mhm.
right? And kind of creating new friendships with people who are already on your mindset. I'm saying all this because that's exactly what I did, right?
Mhm.
Coming from Minnesota, going to Ohio, knowing nobody, having to basically restart, but knowing that I'm now gonna change and be very hyper selective with the people I put in my friend group because I'm built different, right? Cut from a different cloth. I need people who are next to me who are cut from a different cloth. That's why you got
Mhm.
Zachary Owen, Sean Lacey, Tyrone Johnson, Josh Pasesi. The other two guys are also ambassadors of the FLI group. So shout out to them. But guys like you in my network, right? Guys who are really focused on that growth. It was hard to kind of see the guys I grew up with in high school distance away, but sometimes that's life, right? And that's not to say
Yeah.
that you can never reconnect with them in the future. You can't hang out with them. No, you can obviously do that, but it's going to be uncomfortable. And you just got to keep it real with them, right? You just got to keep it real.
Yeah. So change of environment, I think, is critical. Me
Yeah.
and so my I think you've seen Tellers and Trust, my partners on videos
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that. And
I
one of the
met them too. They were at
conversations.
the Miami
Oh yeah,
experience for the
yeah, right in
Standard.
Miami.
Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things we speak about is how important it is for a change of environment. And
Yeah.
I think it's for a couple reasons, but one is for a perspective shift. If you stay in one place your whole life, that's the only perspective you have. And it's very hard to grow if you only keep one perspective. Like as I've traveled and done things and seen different countries and met different groups of people and had different like my perspective, I've gained more perspective, which not only helps me, with it's things like critical thinking and being able to also advise people better, right? Because as a coach, if I only have one perspective to coach you from, then it's limited. I can't really do much for you. But if I've put myself in uncomfortable situations to grow, and I know people think with this one, and it's not enough to just know what they think, but also I have conversations with them to understand why. Because now, oh, I never thought of it that way. But now as I get all these things set up, what it allows me to do is really go in and like give them, okay, well, have you thought about it this way, this way? Because everybody thinks differently. And one thing that
Mhm.
hits
Mhm.
one person well isn't
Mhm.
necessarily going to hit another person well. So being
It's
able
true.
to just pull from these different, and on another note, it also just pushes you when you, like you said, you went to Ohio. Well, when you went there, not knowing anyone, not having those people that you're used to having around in your network just there with you, that forced you to figure out what you really wanted, what to do. You had to choose, all right, well, I can go this way or this way. You chose the way that was going to
Yeah.
be better for you. But
Yeah.
now there was no excuse. It wasn't no, I was born into this. You went there. So whatever path you choose, you
Facts.
chose it.
That's real.
And that's the
Yeah.
difference. When it's
Yeah.
easy to stay home and just use your environment as an excuse, when you go somewhere else, you have a real choice to make.
Hmm. Yeah. No, and that's something that I like to challenge people on, right? And now it doesn't have to be as extreme as like for myself, like going completely different states. Now, mind you, that might be a really good choice for you if you're very limited in the current space that you're at. But it also starts with even the social media you're consuming, right?
Mhm.
Environment and the media that you're consuming, because you're not only the average of the five most people you hang out with, you're also the average of the five most people you watch and
Mm,
you listen to and you consume, right? That's a whole nother environment that people have to take into account, right? So if
yeah.
they're making excuses on their geographical location, okay, well, that's dependent on the geographical location. But now you have to think about, okay, the way that you speak, the way that you act, the way that you think, is it stemming from the media that you're consuming, right? Are you
Mhm.
consuming positive or negative media, right? And that's something we talked about with FLI probably I think this last summer. I went to several high schools back at home in Minnesota where I gave a lot of speeches and keynotes to high school students, and I
Oh, that's
talked
what's
about it and
up.
I kind of gave the parallels. Yeah, yeah, I gave the
Yeah.
parallels between like life and video games, right?
Okay.
And again, I'll kind of put a pin in that. Before that, I also talked about social media because, as you know, a lot of people even younger than us are probably on more social media than we are, which is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, they
And they
grew
have
up
like
in
the
it.
newest iPhones. That's true. They
Yeah.
grew up in it, right? But it's like it's the algorithm of life, and I think that's so fascinating. The algorithm of life, right?
Hmm.
Whatever that you consume or surround yourself with, the algorithm, whether it's life or social media, is going to continue to feed it to you. It's going to
I like
continue
that.
to feed it you,
That's
right?
it. I
Right?
like
Because
that.
that's deep. There's layers to that,
Yeah.
right? Because you think about TikTok. TikTok, very interesting, right? You spend even 1, 2, 3 seconds on a video, doesn't matter what it's related to. You scroll to the next one, it's going to be somewhat similar. I kid you
Yep.
not. It's like let's say someone's like making something with food, or like you're creating like a meal. You maybe oh, that's interesting. Spend a couple seconds on it, more than average. Next, probably something related to food. Why? Because the algorithm is gonna, if you, let's say you stay on the next one again, then the third and the fourth, it's gonna continue to feed it to you. It's gonna continue to feed it to you, right?
Mhm.
So if you think about it like that, same thing for life. Negative people, positive people, any
Mhm.
kind of people, whatever you allow, you're probably going to get more of it. You're most likely, and once you're so deep in one way, it's very hard to switch out of it to the complete opposite. Now, mind you, right? If, let's say you were complete in the positive and you're around positive people, people who are motivating you, well, then why would you want to go to the negative side? Again, that's going to be a hard switch for you internally. Why would you
Yeah.
want to go to the negative side? But on the inverse, if you're deep into the pessimism, people who are glass half empty, right? They're just people who have the kind of that fixed mindset. Well, then it's like that's an excuse. I can sit here, be a victim. I don't want to. I don't want to take responsibility. I don't want to take accountability. I'm good on that, right? That's
Yeah.
equally as hard to do. But whatever you're allowing into your life, it will multiply. It literally is an algorithm, right? And that's something again talked about it just at length with high school students, as well as the parallel between video games, mind you, right? And I think what's very interesting about video games is kind of like if you think of like let's say for you, you probably play back in the day Call of Duty, Madden, NF, like
That's
all
actually that's
if
the
you
two right there.
yeah, yeah, okay, Call of Duty, Madden,
Back
right?
in the
I'm
day.
not back in the day, bro. Like for me, it was Call of Duty and it was FIFA. Oh, I was nasty at FIFA. And
Mm.
Call of Duty, man, quick scoping on Black Ops 2, I was dirty. Nonetheless, I give this parallel to almost all kinds of high school students I talk to. Why? Because a lot of high school guys and girls are a lot into video gaming, right? And if you think about a video game, you have to have strategy. You have to, kind of be thinking outside the box. You have to, have communication skills. You have to be goal oriented, right? There's a lot of like life skills that are in a video game, and they strategically make them in a specific way where it's like you feel like you're getting what you instinctively as a human is getting in life, but in a video game where you're not probably progressing in real life, but you're progressing in the game, right? Because I
Mm.
know, and you probably know, a lot of these people who are probably master prestige, level 100 in all these video games, and they're like their avatar is like fit and just buff, and they're killing it. But in real life, they're probably like a slob. They're not doing anything. They're the mom's basement, right? So they think that their whole life and their avatar is in this video game, when obviously you're not doing anything in real life. But then this is where now where it gets deep, right? When I'm at these high schools and I talk to these kids, and again, a lot of guys back in the day played Call of Duty, right? So they probably know this analogy, as do you. In this game, when you level up and when you achieve things, you probably get compensated for what you do, right? And in the game, it's like XP, which is experience,
Mhm.
or Call of Duty points, or Call of Duty coins, or whatever it is nowadays, right? So you get some sort of monetary return or some sort of experience points, right?
Mhm.
So then I tell these kids, I'm like, guys, I'm not saying it's going to be easy because you're not just going to be sitting in a chair and hopping on with your friends and think you're achieving stuff. No, but can you take those same friends or take that same kind of mindset, that strategy, and apply it to life? Maybe you're picking up a side job over here. Maybe you're networking over there. Maybe you get a degree over here. Maybe you start a business over here. Maybe you're talking to these, like if you ever played Pop Tropica, I think that's an amazing analogy. Like Pop Tropica back in the day, it's a super fun game where you had to like talk to certain people to get certain kind of information, and,
Mm.
and then at the end, like you have to like have this boss battle and get this medal, right? Life is literally the same way. Where now instead of getting a medal in a video game, we're getting Call of Duty points. You get this, and you get actual experience. You get social skills. You get a bigger network, right? So I love to think as my personal life as a video game. This is why like I don't even play video games anymore because I'm literally leveling up my avatar and I'm continuously getting compensated not only monetarily but again with better networks, whether it's
Mhm.
experience, social skills, right? And this is where it starts
Confidence,
to
you know?
confidence, confidence, absolutely, right? And this is where if your outlook on life can really start to get fun if you think about it in that way. That not only is it a video game, But again, going back to the social media, it's also whatever you're going and setting out to get, you're probably going to get more of it, positive or negative, right? So make sure to pay attention to what kind of social media you're watching, what kind of people you're listening to, right? Because you're probably going to get more of it. Same thing in real life. The kind of people you surround yourself with, they probably know people who are just like them. They're going to be surrounded by you. So it's just going to continue to multiply. So the social media and the video game analogies, I love talking to people about that because I think it's completely real.
No, I really like that analogy. You should definitely make some more stuff on that. I think that's dope. So what another thing that kind of feeds off of that is, I having conversations. I talk to a lot of people. Like we talk to a lot of people, and one of the things I see is the general consensus is that only negativity builds and compounds. But
Mm,
one of the things that I try to get people to realize and understand is that positivity also compounds. Like
yeah,
you just like things seem to keep going downhill and you like, oh, this bad thing happened and then that bad thing happened and things just keep getting worse and I just can't escape and I can't win, so why try?
right.
My rebuttal is that, well, if you do try and you give it a strong effort, what that will allow you to do is change the negative from that, because negative things don't happen for no reason. There's something that was done to cause that thing to happen. So the first start to stopping it is, one, identifying those things, those habits like we spoke about earlier, those decisions you're making, because it's all
Right,
about decision making. And if you're making the
right,
right decisions, you can counteract those negative things that are happening. And over time, just like habits and everything else, as those positive decisions and those other positive things continue to compound, now instead of sitting down and every day you getting angry and angry and angrier, it's just going to be more positivity and positivity. And even in times where negative things happen, you know how to overcome them so quickly that you just brush them off. Like it's not even
hmm,
because this isn't, that's just something that happened. That's not a normal part of my life at this point.
yeah,
Like for me,
that's
oh,
good.
go ahead.
No, I was trying to remind myself of the three words I want to talk about. It's Murphy's Law, it's perspective, and it's accountability. And I think that's super interesting because like Murphy's Law, when you think something's going bad and you're already in a bad mood and something else happens bad, then you start to pay really fine attention to all the things that are happening bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Murphy's Law is kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like it's just going to continue to happen whether you pay attention to it or not. But going out of perspective, same thing, right? If things are good happening, right? This is something I used to do probably when I was in like and we talked about this on our podcast a couple weeks ago, on my entrepreneurial journey, like deep into it this last summer, where I was going through it, right? Kind of having the dichotomy from switching to like, corporate America, entrepreneurial, or even trying to
Mm-hmm.
balance too. I was really in my head, right? But having a perspective of like, this is bad or good if I choose it to be. This is
Mm.
bad or good if I choose it to be,
All
right?
about the mindset.
It's all about the mindset. Now that goes to the third point. It's about accountability, right? If it's bad, if something happens, even at like an entrepreneur in the business or at school, if I get an F on an exam, whatever, I'm raising my hand. I'm like, that was on me. It's no, I'm not paying fault to the teacher. I'm not paying fault to my friend I study with. I'm not paying fault to my parents who kept me up because they're talking or whatever. It doesn't matter. Anything that happens in your life, good or bad, you have to take accountability. Now, obviously, it's a fun thing to take accountability when it happens good, but it's even more important to take accountability when things are bad. Because when you take radical accountability, that kind of neutralizes you, right? Because if you're thinking, oh, everything's bad and it's, oh, darn Murphy's Law and the world's out to get me. No, 99% of the time, things that are happening, good or bad, are completely respective to what you did prior to it happening. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about accountability. And I love telling people that when you start to take extreme accountability for everything that happens in your life, good or bad, you start to realize you're really in control of what happens. Like you really are
Mm-hmm.
now, obviously, other than God, but you're really up to the choice of the people you allow into your life, relationships, friendships, whatever. You allow, right? I completely allowed me to be studying biomedical engineering, right? And I could have taken full accountability. I could have learned more and try to find more of my passion when I was younger. Try to understand, okay, maybe what could I, maybe let's go against a little bit respectfully of what my father's telling me. You can go into biomedical engineering. And I did it. Again, that's completely on me, but I'm not saying it's a bad idea. But basically, everything I'm saying is that with the right kind of perspective, where whether it happens good or whether it happens bad, like the whole another aspect too is like kind of only control the controllables. You can't control the uncontrollables. That's a whole other
Yeah.
thing, right? But just again, the big theme I want to talk about here is radical accountability. Right. So if people are always down to the dump, oh, this is always happening to me. I can never get financially wealthy because I always am living paycheck to paycheck. Hold on. Well, why are you living paycheck to paycheck? Because that's completely on you. That's not the government's fault. That's not your parents' fault. That's not your job's fault. They should not that they shouldn't be paying you more, but like, do you have the skills? Are you expressing this to your manager? Are you actually trying to make progress in this? Right. So it's all about accountability. But your average person will play a victim and be like, man, I'm already down in the dumps. Why are you pointing fingers at me? It's not my fault, right? And then they're going to get more and more shelled up. So you have to, obviously, as a coach, you have to be able to wordsmith that correctly in a way that doesn't make them get defensive and ball up, and you kind of put up a shield. But having those kinds of social skills, as you and I do as a coach, able to understand, hey, you know what? Think about it this way, because again, going back to perspective, it's not Murphy's law. It's you. It's accountability, right? And that's why it's very interesting, with like relationships. If you're familiar with Pastor Stephen Chandler from Union Church, he talks about this. I think in this last February, his theme for his sermons was like, it's not that deep, kind of relative to like relationships, right? Romantic relationships. He talked about one of his sermons how like, if you are finding out that a lot of relationships, romantic relationships, are not working, right? You're getting constantly broken up, you're not liking your partner, this, that, and the third. Well, what's the common denominator? Right? Have to have that accountability. And right now, I'm just talking about a relationship, right? The finances, right? Obviously, that's the theme that you and I always talk about. But everything, you have to take accountability, and then you start to understand that it's actually freeing, because now man, I can take control of this. It's not the government that's keeping me poor. It's not the schools because they're not teaching me finances that keeping me poor. No, I'm keeping me poor because I'm not choosing to go and pay for a financial accountability coach, to go and it doesn't have to pay, but I'm not taking the time to go and learn things. I'm not taking, responsibility to get my finances unlocked. That's on me.
Yeah.
Radical accountability. I think that was the big theme I want to get there. But yeah, absolutely great point.
So the flip side of that too, and this is one of the most impactful things I have learned, is building off of, like you said, the accountability allows you to recognize that you are in control of your life and you're the only one in control of it. But on the flip side, the thing that was told to me was that if you don't take accountability and you blame everyone and everything else for what's going bad in your life, then all you're doing is telling yourself that you have no control over your life. And when you have no control over your life, things tend to happen that you didn't plan for.
Yeah.
So hearing that, I was like, oh, nah. Yeah. Like I ain't no excuses over here. I got it. I did it because I do feel like I'm a person that's in control. And if something happens that I didn't plan for, you best believe it won't be long until I've gotten control of that too. Like it's not there's no other option. Like why I trust me more than anyone else, because I always have my best interests at heart. And that's what I would tell my clients. Like, yo, the only person that can truly have your best interests at heart is you. Because at the end of the day, after we sit down and we discuss the plans and we talk about all these things, you're the one that has to execute it. I can't execute it. All I can do is make sure that I'm giving you the most effective information to help you do what you need to do. But at the end of the day, you are completely the one in control of how this outcome comes out. It's either going to work, and if it works, it's because you did what needed to happen for it to work.
That's true. And that's good accountability. Yeah.
You didn't do what needed to happen for it to work. And it's very clear, but the decision is on you. But either way, you got to recognize that it's completely in your control. But once you recognize that, it is truly freeing, because then it tells you like, okay, well, I can do it then. There's what can I do? And the only things that you may not be able to do at the time are the things that you're limited to by skill and information, but those are things that you can attain. And if you get control of your finances, your ability to attain different skills and more information happens faster, because now instead of working every day to pay other people back, you can build that money up to start investing in yourself. And as you invest in yourself and learn these skills, these attributes, these things, now you're making yourself better. But along the way, you're going to make everyone else around you better. And though, going through those things, going to these events, learning these things is also going to probably bring you to groups of people that are more likely you. Like you see everything builds and it builds. Comes together. It starts, I tell people, they're like, it's like, yo, just start. Just start. It doesn't have to. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me, even with business, anything, is like, the perfection is I have to get it 100% right. And like anybody, I tell people, yo, it takes 90 days for you to even perfect most people, about 90 days to perfect a budget. So if going in, it's probably going to take you 90 days to where you get comfortable, your number, how to operate, how you want to set things up. Why would you allow little mistake, little things here and there between that 90 days to upset you and derail you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's a part of the
No.
process because
100%.
you have to learn. The people don't recognize that failure is all it is you just learn what not to do. That's another thing you get to add to your catalog. You know, I talk on the business side, right? I talk to people and they're like, you'll see a guy and he could, let's say like a property, he could walk up and be like, oh man, you know what? It's probably going to take about this much to do this, blah, blah. I need to do the floors, the walls. That's going to cost about this much based off of this. Okay. So the roof's going to need to be replaced. And then somebody who's coming into it is like, wow, how does he know all of this? Like, I could never be that smart. But they don't recognize that, yo, he put in 15 years of pain, and every lesson that's cost him bread, tears, blood, all of those things, that's cataloged in the back of his brain. So now all those lessons he learned through the losses got him to the point to where he can walk up and immediately evaluate a deal. But it didn't happen overnight. But there's this thought that now, especially with, you know, Amazon and social media, everything happens so fast, and people go into all these situations. Even how long is this going to take? Well, it's going to take as long as it took. But like, you know, if it took you 10 years to get into $80,000 of debt, don't expect to get out of it overnight. Like, that's just unrealistic. Like, you wasn't complaining when you were getting there. Like, it can't happen overnight. You got to get yourself where it needs to be.
Yeah. Oh man. And there's so much to unpack right there, right? So it's so good. So good. So number one, I think the biggest thing you talked about, like the journey, right? And this is where, again, the video game analogy starts to come back up, because it's like, we're not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. It's not going to be easy. But you go back to the perspective, all the things that you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago about, you know, the people that you have around you, the jobs, the businesses, the schooling, self-education, whatever. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of it. But can you shift your perspective and be like, you know, this, I can make it fun. Like, you can make it fun. You can make the journey enjoyable. And that's the beautiful thing about it, right? Because it's like, without being hyper fixed on the destination, when you find happiness and joy in the pursuit, like, that's where it really starts to become addicting in the best way possible, right? You're enjoying, you know, getting up early and hitting the gym. You're enjoying, and then you start to focus on the details, right? Like, whether you bring a hat to the gym, now you're locked in. You turn down the bill, now it's just you and your music. You're locked in. You're taking photos for accountability in the gym, right? You know, and with the budget, you're starting to see some traction with your budget after the 90 days. Oh wow, like, I really start to understand my habits. I'm actually getting this. So then you start to double down, maybe with your spirituality, maybe like you're going to church, you're reading the Bible more, and starting to understand even why you're religious in the first place, right? Or what God is. Like, I understand all these things, right? And again, I can talk about multifacets of life, but when you start to have this understanding that the fun in the game is actually life, and that you have control of it, and you start to shift your perspective of, this is fun. That's where it really starts to really feel like you are the main character of your movie, right? So that's just one of the first things I want to talk about, because I think that's super interesting, right? And then now for the second thing, it's like, for me, for a lot of people, I understand that this kind of topic is seldomly talked about, right? So giving that benefit of the doubt, it's okay, I understand where you're coming from. I completely understand. But then having that kind of like, hey, I've been there. I know having that empathy, like, I know exactly what you've been through. And us as a coach, maybe you're showing receipts. I've done this. I know exactly what that's through, right? I like to tell people, you're going to go through something that me teaching you, you're going to surpass a lot of the failures, like you're talking about, that I went through, right? But then now, when I talk about the failures, I don't want them to be discouraged about failure, because this is very interesting, right? When someone says, oh man, I took an L on this exam, or I took an L with this business, or I took an L with this, right? Well, what's that L? What does it stand for? It stands for a lesson, right?
If you
It's
pull
a
it out.
lesson. If you pull it out, true. It's true. Again, it's about perspective. Big facts, right? It's a lesson, right? And that's something that I think is just very interesting, how like school, just to talk about very briefly, it's like school, they very much like, they scare you from failure. And I think that's one of the things I really like. I'm building a better relationship with school as I'm finishing up here in May, and I want to, because again, I want to make sure I have a good mindset to finish off and finish strong. But like a couple of years ago, I'm gonna keep it real. A couple of years ago, like, I hated school, not because school itself and being around people. No, it's about like, if you failed or you did bad or got a D or a C, like everybody, especially engineering, right? You know this. Like everybody's like top tier prep, right? Like you would have your peers cry if they got a 97 on an exam, right? And I'm looking at that, you know what I'm saying? And I'm looking at that like chill, like you're not, like, it's not that deep, right? So school for a lot of people has very much frowned upon failure. But
Mhm.
I like to tell people failure is one of the it's going to teach you so much more than your teacher did, right? Because there's theory is one thing, application is a whole other thing. With
Yeah.
application, you're probably going to fail. Even
The
with
art.
theory and the application, you're probably going to fail, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think school sets people up for the real world in that area, because I know people personally that they put a lot of their identity in their grades and how,
Mhm.
that is a reflection of who they are. Where once you get past school, there's no such thing as a grade. So how are you gonna deal with that,
Yeah. How
right?
do you
What
define
is your
yourself?
who's going to hold your identity now, right?
Mhm.
That's where you have to kind of take full accountability. Hey, if I fail an exam, number one, that's on me. But number two, it's not that deep. Like, now I know I have to change the way that I study,
Yeah.
or I need to take this a little more seriously, or I need to sit in the front of the class, right?
Yeah.
So these kinds of lessons are crucial, and in my opinion, are way more valuable. If you ask, again, like you just mentioned, that person who's looking at the house, they know all these things because they failed a lot. They know exactly what's going to fail, right? So even your average millionaire, they've gone through so many failures, but have used those as stepping stones to continue and most likely expedite their success, right? So I like to tell everybody, you're going to fail, but that's perfectly part of the process. You're going to
Yeah.
learn so much from that. So even though it does take you 3 months to master a budget on average, right? Those first 3 months prior to mastering it, you're gonna go outside of your allotted money that you
Mhm.
allotted, right?
Yep.
You're gonna, you're gonna have to sacrifice some things. It's not gonna feel so good. But those failures in the budget, by that third month, it's like, okay, now I got this down. I
Yeah.
got this
Now it's
down.
starting to
Why?
make sense.
It's
Starting
starting
to
to make
click.
sense, right? Because again,
Mhm.
what does the failure tap into? Going to the beginning of this podcast, it taps into your emotion. Oh man, I'm
Mhm.
not cut out for this. Or oh man, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Right? The Dunning Kruger effect. You really think you're something until, ooh man, I'm nothing. And then you go on, and then let me put my finger over here. Dunning Kruger guy goes like this. Ooh, I really think I'm something. And then you really get slapped in the face by reality, or other people who are better than you. Ooh, I'm
Yeah.
nothing compared to any of the things I thought I was. And then now you go on this process of mastery, right? That's what I love about the
Mhm.
Dunning Kruger effect, right? So I think a lot of this is absolutely true what you're talking about. And then for our listeners out there, please, like, you're going to fail, but you're going to learn so much from those lessons.
Yeah.
You learn so much from those lessons. That was good.
So the final thing that I want to mention today is something that I like, that I speak about with people, and it's through, so we talk about perspective a lot, and this is a
Right,
perspective that's grown on me over time. And at the beginning of this conversation, we started talking about time, and many times you'll hear people, like we're talking, like, for instance, the budget, right? And it's like,
right,
or hey, it's going to take me, whatever it may be, whether it's getting out of debt, whether it's investing, whatever it may be. But let's say they say like, oh well, I don't want to do it because it's going to take me 5 years.
mm,
But my question or my rebuttal to them is, well, 5 years is going to pass regardless. So when you want something to show for it,
that's good.
because
Yeah,
they're complaining about something taking 5 years to get
right,
where they need to be, yet in 5 years, that time is still gone. But now, on one end, 5 years, they're where they needed to be. The other, they just got 5 years of the same problem.
it's good. Yeah. I mean, obviously, they're meaning like they want it now, right? They want it
Mm-hmm.
now. But then there's a whole other aspect of kind of going to tap very much or a little bit into the spirituality aspect. Like, and I'm even experiencing this myself, right? Graduating, looking for full time opportunities. It's like God, He is not going to put you in a space or a place where you're not ready for it, right? So He's preparing you in a certain season to open up a door. He's not going to let you walk through a door before you're ready, right? So even if it takes 5 years, it takes 10, it takes three. Number one, trust the process. And you hear that a lot, but you have to. But even more importantly, like, people are saying, oh, it's going to take 5 years. Well, you're assuming that those 5 years are going to be negative or you're not going to like it. Let's go back to the perspective. Why? And I'm not, obviously it's rhetorical, but like, can you find enjoyment? Again, now that you got to tap into your why, can you find enjoyment in those 5 years? Oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take 5 years, and I'm excited. Let's go. It's only going to take 5 years, man. I'm ready to go. And just like I'm going to use what you just said. Well, I can do it. Not that I can do it in my lifetime, but what I'm saying is, in these next 5 years it's going to happen anyway. Why not? Like,
Yeah.
like it's going to happen. Why not me? Right? Why can't I do it? Right? But it's all about finding fun in it, but also understanding it might just take X amount of time before you're ready to enter that season of life that you want so badly that you're not ready for right now. You're not ready. If you won the Powerball today, where it's a lot of people who win the lottery, they go bankrupt. Why? Because they're not ready for that season or they're in a season where they're not ready for that door to be open, and it's just abruptly opened, and now they get bankrupt or they go, a lot of things happen because they're not ready for that season of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a lot of people, they have to understand where you currently are, where you want to be. It might take X amount of years. Find enjoyment in that process, and then understand that there's a reason why you don't have it now, and it might
Mm-hmm.
be greater than you can even understand. Right? There's a whole spirituality aspect to it where it's like God is not going to open up a door for you that you're not ready to walk through because He's still preparing you in that season of life. So I love what you said. I think it's a beautiful rebuttal. Like the 5 years is going to happen anyway. Like, you want to do another same 5 years of things you've been doing, or do you want to change some stuff up? Right? Find some fun in it. It's a good
Yeah.
question.
So before we get off here today, do you have anything else you want to leave the listeners with? And also you make sure you tell them, where they can find you at, follow you, your
Yeah,
website, all that stuff. And I'll also, link all of his information in the description for the show as well. And once
I
again, I'm also
appreciate
going
that.
to go and link the podcast episode from a couple weeks ago
Yeah,
on there as well. But go ahead,
no, that's
floor is
good.
yours. Floor is yours.
Oh, of course. No, number one, Eric, I just want to appreciate you having me on. Again, I know you and I met over Discord a couple months back, which is awesome. I'm glad this has come to fruition, and I'm looking forward to the opportunities that are in the near future. And again, the things for our listeners, please go and listen to that podcast a couple weeks back. Because Eric, you think I dropped some gems? My guy dropped some serious gems in that podcast. So I
Appreciate you,
appreciate you
my
for hopping
brother.
on 100%. So again, thank you. Shout out to your listeners. Make sure you're tapping into Eric. He's someone who I can already understand he's going to be doing great things. Again, some of the things we talked about in the last podcast, man, I'm excited for him. So, no, again, appreciate you. This is just something that you and I are both aligned with the mission and the vision to kind of teach more people those financial literacy skills. Because a lot of people will think, oh, like, how are these two hopping on a podcast? Aren't they, competing for the same thing? No, again, that's kind of a fixed mindset with the growth
Yeah.
mindset. And there's so much information and people that we can help. And
It's
it's
enough
really,
out here.
there's so much out here, man. We can all eat. Like, I love to give the
Mm-hmm.
analogy of like, and I've seen this in real life. I kid you not, like a four-way stop. And on each one of those corners has been a gas station. And why are they all thriving? All probably around the same price, $3.16 or whatever it is, doesn't matter, right? They're all at the same price because there's just so many cars, there's so much influx of people, and they're all able to survive, right? So if you think about it like that, whether again, people from our listeners, they're thinking that maybe they should withhold their information from people who they could perhaps build with. No, collaborate. That's exactly what Eric and I are doing. Eric and I are doing, and probably we're doing with other people as well. Collaborate, because there's so much
Mm-hmm.
out there. There's so much, and we didn't even talk about it that much today, and that could be a whole other conversation for another day. But the
Yeah.
abundance mindset, right? There's just so much out there, whether it's money, whether it's opportunities, whether it's jobs, whether it's even a potential partner, right?
Yeah.
There's just so much out there than what our little mind can comprehend. But when you're open to understand that there's so much out there that you can't like really define it, then it's like, hey man, like I'm down having a conversation and share gems with Eric because I know
Yeah.
I want him to win. If he wins, I freaking win, right? Because we're both committed to that mission. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying all that to say that again, I appreciate you, giving me the honor to hop on this podcast. I'm looking forward to seeing it come to fruition. And again, for all the listeners, that if you made it this far, we appreciate you. We love you, and we're looking forward to hopefully connect with you. So yeah, for me, you can find me primarily on LinkedIn. I don't really have personal social media like that. So my personal LinkedIn is Olayinka Famodu. Now again, my my first name again, well, it means wealth surrounds me. So it's a Nigerian Yoruba name. So my O actually has the dot right under it. So for a lot of people, they told me, it's hard to find you on LinkedIn when I try to look you up. Yeah, it kind of sucks because if you type in a regular O on LinkedIn, LinkedIn doesn't have the algorithm
Oh,
that will pull up all the.
you gotta hold the
Yep.
O.
Well, you got to hold the O, but not many keyboards even do that. So what do you have to do? You have to probably type
Mm.
my last name, right? So Famodu. That's where you'll probably find me, right? So
Okay.
Olayinka Famodu. And then, business social media with the FLI at the Financial Literacy Institute. I know it's a relatively long name, but the website will probably do you much better. www.thefli.net, thefli.net. And again, hopefully we'll be hearing from you guys as well. But appreciate you, Eric. Fire podcast. I'm looking forward to be on a future one as well. Because again, the things you're going to be doing, man, I'm advocating for you. So I appreciate you.
Hey, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, bro. Yeah, we definitely got some good stuff coming in the future too. So we'll definitely have some more conversations. I mean, it only makes sense. We both in the same industry, and this is important, I think, for the listeners. Kind of what you said is,
Right.
you know, competition doesn't always have to look the way we look. Like sometimes we get like it pushes us, like I see what you're doing, you see what I'm doing. Okay, hey, I can push a little. Or, hey, he's posting more, let me post more. It's not
Right.
always a bad thing. Oh, bro, I seen you stepping it up. Like I'm about to step it up too. Like you can congratulate because you want to breathe, like iron sharpens iron. And so
Facts.
I think it was great that we came on here because it shows that, like, what do you have to be? There's my favorite phrase you kind of hit on earlier. Everybody eats. If anybody that's been around me that stays around here, they know that's my phrase all the time. I mean it
We're all eating.
literally, and physically. Like
True.
I really feed everybody. That's kind of what I like to
That's
do.
awesome.
So,
Yeah.
but hey, big thanks to you coming on the show again. Great conversation, great answers. I'm really glad you were able to make it on here, especially after having me on your show as well. I couldn't have me on yours and not flip it around and have you come back over
Appreciate
here.
you.
So
Appreciate
for
you.
the listeners, I definitely hope that y'all glean some things from the conversation today. Really good conversation, and I'm looking forward to the comments and the feedback from everything. So really, I mean, that's all we got. So, as I always like to say, yeah, let's get in the smoker.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.